and we're on the bus, and like these wrestling matches are breaking out, and guys are like getting thrown across the bus, And here I am, I'm out of school. I'm like 160 pounds. I'm like just turned 20 years old, and I'm sitting, and Flatley's up in the front, and he turns, he goes, "Sombrotto, get up here now." He goes like, your career will be over quick. He goes, "You're going to get squashed over there with these guys." I mean, they're going at it. The bus rides were rougher than the game.
Welcome back to the Nothing Near Post Show. Got two exciting guests today that we're fired up to talk to. A ton of lacrosse knowledge and history and expertise. But the first guy I want to intro is a Hempstead, New York native, a Roanoke College legend, a two-time USCLA All-American, the 1978 most outstanding player in club lacrosse, playing goalie for the Long Island Lacrosse Club, the 1980 MVP of the USCLA Club Championship game, a two-time alternate on Team USA, and he was the 1982 roster starting goaltender and captain. He was at one point the head coach of the Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club, a three-time USCLA champion as a coach, an MILL general manager and player for the New Jersey Saints and Detroit Turbos, where he earned 7th Man of the Year honors in back-to-back years, an assistant coach for the World Championship Team USA roster in 1998, co-founder of the Israel Lacrosse Association, and he is in the Roanoke College Athletics Hall of Fame, the Virginia State Lacrosse Hall of Fame, the New York Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. It's my honor to welcome Bill Beroza to the Nothing Near Post Show. Thanks for being here, Coach.
Thank you. Wow. You only left out one thing, Long Island Hall of Fame.
Long Island Lacrosse Hall of Fame. You're right.
I was wondering if my mother sent that to you.
We got to do our research around here. Alongside Bill, we have a Port Washington, New York native, Chaminade High School grad, a USILA All-American in 1980 for the Hofstra Pride, one of only two men to have been named to and played on 4 USA rosters in World Championships, 82, 86, 90, 94. The other guy being John DiTommaso. He was named the captain for the 1982 roster, went on to be named All-World Team that same year, a 3-time National Club Player of the Year with the Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club, a Newsday All-Century Team recognition, a Krogard Award recipient, a 9-year pro career with the New York Saints and the Long Island Lizards, a member of the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame, the Long Island Metropolitan Lacrosse Hall of Fame, the Hofstra Athletics Hall of Fame, and my personal favorite, the Port Washington Youth Activities Hall of Fame.
There you go.
And he's known to many in the lacrosse world as the, quote, ageless wonder. It is awesome to welcome Vinnie Sombrotto to the Nothing Near Post Show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Max. I'm happy to be here, and happy to be here with not only a fantastic player, but a fantastic teammate in Bill Beroza and friend.
That's awesome. Yeah, so obviously both guys have Long Island roots through and through, but also Long Island Lacrosse Club roots. And this came together after I read the PLL's piece on that club team from Baltimore. And I felt like it was only fair for someone to tell the other side of the story. You were both obviously Long Island lacrosse legends, so who better to shine light on the triumphs of the Long Island Lacrosse Club than you two? I think to start, I'd love for you guys to kind of take me through the history of the club a little bit. Just off the jump, I saw it don the name the Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club at one point, but started as the Long Island, I believe, Athletic Club Lacrosse. Can you guys talk me through a little bit of where it started or kind of where it started for you all?
Yeah, I'll try. I'll start and then I'll let Vinnie add to it. But going back and doing some history, I don't know if it was in existence before 1967, but Long Island was the Long Island Athletic Club. And they had an incredible, talented group of players and won many championships. Mount Washington was the other main competitor down south than Long Island. But Long Island won the championship from 68 to 71, 4 years in a row. and then I missed history on that. And then Mount Washington won 75-77. But Long Island Lacrosse Club was made up of basically first team, second team, third team All-Americans from colleges. When they graduated college, they had nowhere to go. So it was basically a beer league, but it was the best players in the world. And it's evolved, and we could talk more about the championships and the history. But Vinny, I'll let you chime in with any thoughts you have.
Well, the only thing I would say is, prior, Bill was playing for Long Island. He's a few years older than me, and he was already established star from Roanoke and was playing in the club ranks. And they were playing their games by the time I was playing at Hofstra University. They would play their home games, but I really never got to see them. I never got, whatever the conflicts were, I never got there. But I knew what the rosters were like. But as far as the history, when Bill says, the name kind of changed over the years, and it was the Long Island Athletic Club, and they used to wear with LIAC was across the top of the jersey. And they actually had a facility at one time, the LIAC, that, you were like a member, now New York AC is much more established, and it has a building in Manhattan and the whole bit. This was some small building somewhere in Nassau County that they had. And what was interesting, and I don't know if you've heard this, Bill, but when you're at Hofstra Stadium, there's a building like an IRS building, almost on the corner of Hempstead Turnpike and another building that Hofstra owns. And Hofstra owns that because actually the LIAC owned that piece of property. They gave it to Hofstra. And in return, the Long Island Lacrosse Club was able to play on the Hofstra field for years after that. That was the deal they cut. We'll give you this building, but we get to use this field whenever we want. And that's how we established Hofstra basically as our home base. And ultimately, how it went from Long Island Lacrosse Club to Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club was because at some point they were like, maybe looking to kick us off the field or charge us to be there. We said, wait a minute, we made a deal 35 years ago, whatever it was, to play here in perpetuity. We just got to pay a little fee to put the lights on. And ultimately, that was it. That was our home base, Hofstra University, for many years.
Hey, Vinny, let me just comment. What's ironic is I'm glad you told it that way because so Long Island Athletic Club, when they started, it was black and gold. Those were our colors. And so you see Vinny wearing a Long Island, it's blue now. And so once we became Hofstra, Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club, we changed all of our jerseys over to blue and gold instead of black and gold. But I remember being in high school, and I did see the first national championship there with Cornell and Maryland in '71, and that was such an exciting time. But as important, Friday nights I used to go to Hofstra to watch Long Island AC play in their black and gold uniforms, and Bob Rule was a goalie, and Ron Frazier, and the list went on and on, Tom Postel, et cetera, some legends of the game. And I watched them play, and I was in high school, and I said, I want to play on that team when I get older. That was my dream, and it worked out okay.
Now, speaking of that field, what was the name of the field? Did it have a name, or was it just where you guys went, and that was like where the facility was?
That was the field really didn't have a name. The stadium they did name after a former president, and he actually was a lacrosse player. I think James Shewitt Stadium, and then that kind of morphed into some things because a teammate of mine from Hofstra, Jim Metzger, he was very generous with them, and he's got his name on part of the building now and the whole bit. Over years, this is what happens, and all good. And but Hofstra was considered really the mecca of lacrosse. I mean, I still think it's almost one of the best venues to watch a lacrosse game, and obviously with the history of all the players. But like Bill, he was fortunate enough to go see a Long Island game and see these guys and get an idea of what it's supposed to look like, so to speak. Me, I never even saw a college game till I was in college. I didn't have that background. I didn't know anything about it. And, so it was a little bit of, sticker shock and adjustment to show up and play in college and be on that field that had such history, and to be, playing at Hofstra. And then, of course, after I finished my career at Hofstra, to be playing for the Long Island team that played on that field And there were a couple years they redid the turf and we had them move to the grass for a year or something like that. But for the most part, we were on that turf for many, many years.
Wasn't it like cement?
Yeah, I mean, they say that the Hofstra turf that we were playing on when you came out of college, Bill, and all, like that turf was the only the second turf installed in the country. The other one was the Houston Astrodome. The second one was at Hofstra. And the Astrodome changed it like, I don't know how many times. We were still playing on one that was so old, it was like an indoor-outdoor carpet. It was so thin. And when you ran on it, the field was very crowned. And like if you were on one side on a face-off on a wing and you looked across, you could barely see the guy because the field was so crowned. That's how crowned the field was. And when you ran, it sounded like you were running on a boardwalk, because it was like plywood or something under there. And Bill will remember there were pebbles on the sideline. And the thing was to hit a guy hard enough, knock him out of bounds, make him land in the pebble. We say, put the guy on Pebble Beach, And so there was a lot. And by the way, whatever turf there was, when you went down on that thing, forget it. Your skin was off immediately. I mean, there was more turf burns from that old Hofstra turf. And they finally replaced it, I think, when I was a junior. Probably that was about 1979. They replaced it. You won the club championship. We lost in 79. That was the year I was out of school. And I think that's when they were redoing the turf.
That's amazing.
And so, the history of Long Island Lacrosse Club, Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club, how it intertwines with Hofstra is really amazing, because like I said, to us, that was always the Mecca. When people came in to play us there, they knew they had a problem.
I love it. Now, I want to jump into the rosters a little bit, but first, can you give us a little background, like paint the picture of what a typical week looked like for a Long Island Lacrosse Club guy? Like, I think people were probably working maybe in the city or working on the island or whatever, where their practices, games were on Friday nights. We've already talked about, but can you paint a little picture of what a week looked like for a Long Island Lacrosse Club guy?
Yeah, and it evolved from starting on Friday nights, and then it became, because everybody's working, it became Saturdays and Sundays, and over the history of lacrosse and club, it was basically Sunday games. But we had firemen, we had policemen, we had doctors, we had lawyers. Bob Maimoni was a face-off guy from Hopkins who, as a freshman, won the national championship at Hopkins. He's our face-off guy. He was a maxillofacial surgeon. So he's like, all right, I'll play 1 year, but I don't want to ruin my hands. I mean, that's an example of a guy. So we had surgeons, but we had teachers. We had, Ron Frazier worked for Coca-Cola. So everybody had day jobs. There was no income, no nothing. It cost every player to play in club lacrosse. And so, there was practice maybe once a week, and that was it. So you had to work out either on your own if you wanted to stay in shape or get better. And some guys did, some guys didn't. Vinny's an example of a guy, I think he worked 8 days a week working out. But so anyway, Vinny, you can add to that.
Well, but Bill, look, he's being modest in the fact that, you talk about what practices we could have. We normally would have like a practice one day during the week. We really didn't practice like a day before a game or something like that. We had a practice during the week. If we were lucky enough, maybe near the end of the year, maybe we got the field twice and had 2 practices. But you were really left to your own devices in terms of staying in shape. It just was a question of, what your obligations were with work. Some guys were starting families. But Bill is legendary in the fact that he was living in Detroit and flying in for games. I mean, that's commitment when you're coming in from, how many years did you do that where you flew in from Detroit, Bill? You did it at least 3 years.
4 years.
4 years? Yeah, I mean, look, without him, the team wouldn't be the same. He was our guy in the goal, and it was like, well, Beroza's going to Detroit. He's working for IBM. Or, we were like, what are we going to do? And it was like, no, don't worry. He's flying in. I'm like, really? Flying in? So
I love it.
That's a level of commitment that not only he had, but other guys had on that team. As I said, some guys were starting families. Some guys had jobs. So it gets difficult. And, with club lacrosse, I could speak for my own history. The guys running it, which all credit to a guy like John Phillips, who, he as a general manager, team, whatever you want to call him, assistant coach, general manager, he was everything in one. His main guy with him, we had a head coach in Tom Flatley when I was there. And of course, Bill coached, was a head coach with us. We had Stan Kowalski coached. It was always like either a former player or somebody who was attached to the team. But, we had ancillary people. We had a Joe McConnell who kept the scorebook for 100 years. You had Mr. and Mrs. Beroza who, Mr. B, you weren't getting by without making a donation at the gate at Hofstra to the team. Mrs. Beroza was chasing the lacrosse balls around so we didn't lose any. Mr. Catrone was on the sideline filling water buckets. We always had these other people that were so into it, and they meant so much to us. Maybe we could have said more to them and what they meant to us at the time, but it was just like they were always there, and it was like that support is what made our team so great, that we always felt like, there was the unique thing about Long Island was there were other teams around. There was at the time Tobay, there was, the New York Athletic Club, they were kind of starting out. There was
North Hempstead, Suffolk.
North Hempstead came later, Suffolk came later. It was the concentration of players on Long Island teams was so much that you had all Americans that couldn't get in a game. That's the talent level we had. And, from a standpoint of, like Bill just mentioned, North Hempstead, right? So we played for the club championship. One of the few times we played it up on Long Island in 1981, we played at Adelphi. We played the Mount Washington Lacrosse Club, who they said it was an upset. They beat the Maryland Lacrosse Club, and they came up all, full of piss and vinegar. They thought they had the team. And we really smoked them that day. I think we won by 9. It was like
I think it was 21-12.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was the score. And this is 81, and we're so deep with obviously the game is played different now. You're more specialized and all. When you played midfield, which is what I played, you played offense, you played defense, you went out. The next midfield went in, they offense, they out. Then the next, sometimes you used it on that team. We could have went 4 lines deep and were really good. So here we are in the championship, supposed to be happy we're winning the game. The middies are fighting in the box about getting on the field, So that's when Harvey Cohen, he said, we got to start another team because there's just too much concentrated talent with this one team. So we ended up, a bunch of guys who grew up on the North Shore, they went and played for North Hempstead. And they had some great teams. It just was they had to get by us, and they never could. They had never played in a final till many years later. We always would beat them, and whether it was the Northern Final or the semifinals for the North. It took a long time for any of those teams to break through Long Island. We had a few years when New York AC knocked us off. Bryan beat us. Bryan was a great team out of Boston. But for the most part, there was a run there where we were in the finals every single year. It just was like, and I used to just say, well, we're like the Yankees of lacrosse, pretty much. We're the team you want to hate, but you got to admire because we find ways to win.
Sure.
And like I said, the succession of, having Bill in the goal, which was a huge plus for us because he was phenomenal. So you had an edge going into the game with him in the goal. And then when Bill finally, wasn't coming down anymore, and then you have Larry Quinn comes in after him, who's a Hall of Famer. And then after him, you got Sal Locascio, who's a Hall of Famer. So you think you're playing really good defense, but the truth is you got bailed out by these goalies your whole life, You guys were making saves that probably normal goalies wouldn't be making. They were all so good.
Well, so speaking of those rosters, from what I could find, it was pretty much 99% geography based, right? All Long Island guys or Westchester guys, whatever. Was there ever a guy from like Philly or Baltimore who like moved to the island to work and played, or was it no? We're the Long Island Lacrosse Club. We play with the Long Island guys, and we're gonna go to battle with what we got.
If somebody moved to New York City or Long Island, a guy like Pat Reed, came there to work in Manhattan, and he says, he was a Baltimore guy. It's like, come play with us. But, other than that, there's a handful of
We
guys.
had a few. Reed Jackson,
Right.
you know, he was from Jersey. We had Timmy Sher, who played against us, who was really excellent. And I said, why playing on this team? You're never going to win. Come play with us. He lived up, but he came down, played with us for many years. He was a great addition. We would see Peter Von Hoffman, who played for like Jersey Lacrosse Club or something. I said to him, come play with us, you know. And everybody wanted to. I think when they did come to our team, they had a lot of fun playing with our team, you know, not only because of the winning, but we just had a great camaraderie. But I think, you know, when Bill was already established and he was there, and you just, in his bio, you said he was already the MVP of the championship game and all. I was in school at that time, and then I was out of school for a year in '79. And just to give you like how it goes down with the Long Island Lacrosse Club, I was out of school, but I'm going to play. And I'm saying, I'm going to go to the best team. I'm going to go try to play on Long Island. So I go to first, I find out the dates. I go to first weekend. There's like 140 guys there, you know, and I'm like, and I'm really only 20 years old at the time. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to make this team? You know, I better find a way, what I could add somehow to this team to make this team. And the first weekend goes, we play, you know, and you got so many guys out there. They're trying to run a practice. The second weekend, half the team self-cuts. You know, they're like, I'm just not this level, right? So they say, I better find another team. I'll never make this team or play for this team. Then it starts to whittle down. You get another weekend comes. Now it got down. I don't know if you remember this, Bill, but it got down to like 50 guys. And then after that practice, Tom Flatley calls us in and he says, great having all you guys here and you're stuck through to now. And, you know, but we still have too many guys. You know, we can't have a team with 50 guys on a sideline, guys complaining about getting in a game and stuff like that. So he said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to send out a letter. And in that letter is going to be the roster. These are the guys on the team. The rest of you, if you're not on that list, you could come as a social member. You could come practice. And he knows most guys just walk away at that point, you know. So now he's saying that, and I'm like, oh man, I hope I'm on this list, you know. So because there was, I mean, literally every guy was an All-American that was left, you know.
Totally.
And so from a personal experience, what happened with me was, you know, I think that they were going to leave me off that list. And whether I was good enough or not good enough didn't matter because they thought I had 2 more years of eligibility, was going to go back to school. And it was Tom Postel, who was still playing at the time and like assistant coaching. And he said, you know, I don't know. I think I'd keep this kid because if we don't take him this time, he might not play for us when he comes out of school. And he seems to like to play, you know. He likes to play. And he goes, what do we know from year to year who comes back? And the fact that they kept me that year, and then we won in 1981, and even though North Hempstead had started and there were different teams, I would never think of playing for anybody for Long Island because they made me what I was in the game by giving me that opportunity, you know. So I said, I'm not leaving Long Island. I'll stay. And I ended up, you know, playing on the team for 21 years. So I think Postel called that one right, that he knew I liked to play.
No, and I'm happy you stuck around too, Vinny. And that North Hempstead team had incredible players: John Driscoll, Brendan Schneck, Paul Schmoller in the goal. Rest in peace, Paul. You know, yeah. I mean, they had
Chris Kane. You know, they had a whole bunch of the guys. So going back to '81, when we won that club championship, that was a tryout year for the USA team. I don't know how many guys we had. We must have had over 20 guys at the tryout from our team. 8 of our 10 starters made the USA team. The whole defense, including Bill in the goal, right? Joe Kovar, Jimmy Burke, and Chris Kane. Bill in the goal. The whole first midfield, me, John Driscoll, and Billy Marino, and Bobby Engelke from the attack.
And Norman Engelke.
Norman wasn't on that team that year.
Okay, thank you, Bobby.
Yeah. But 8 of our 10 starters made the USA team. So that tells you how strong our team was. Yeah. And then you go to 86. We had almost about the same amount. 5 of our midfielders made the USA team.
So and I do have to, and Larry Quinn made the USA team too.
And 86 Larry made the team. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so speaking of the roster, I was doing a little digging, and Bill, I appreciate you pulling some of those notes together. But I mean, legends: Pat McCabe, Eamon McEnany, John Reese. Already talked about Sal Licasio, Tom Hayes, Roy Colsey. Then you got guys who had went on to have illustrious coaching careers. You know, obviously Coach Beroza, but you got guys like John Danowski, Jack Emmer, Jack Haley, Bill Tierney, Richie Moran, all Long Island Lacrosse Club guys.
Yeah.
And then I think Vinny, I saw another Sombrotto on the roster. Was that a brother?
That's my brother Steven. Yeah.
Did you share the field with him? Did you guys overlap?
Yeah, we played a lot of years together. I mean, the truth is, he's the one kept me playing, because even though when I was kind of getting tired and like maybe I should pack it in, my brother was like, "Give me one more year. Come on, one more year. You could still do it. Do one more year." You know, and he was getting better and better as he got older. You know, he had a nice career at CW Post. He played for Tom Postel. Stephen didn't go to school, my brother, right out of high school. He worked for a year, and he came and played on the Long Island Lacrosse Club. He was this little skinny 18-year-old kid. And Postel saw him and said, "I like this kid. I think he's a late bloomer, and I'll take him," you know. And he ended up having a nice career at Post. Then he came out, and, you know, I kind of insisted that he played on the midfield with me because I wanted to play with him. And I knew I could help him playing with him, you know, to advance his skill level and all, and his understanding of the game, because everybody there was so good with skills and everything else. It really was more about understanding how to play the game. And that's one thing Bill did as a coach, you know, not only the great the game plans, but he knew who to put together. He understood that. And, you know, he took input from the players, and it worked because, you know, we were very hard to beat.
Sure.
Well, 96, 97, when we won the club championship, and I was coaching then, and you ran with Steven, and I think either Norm or Randy Natoli ran with you. I forgot who the third guy was.
Yeah, Harpo. Norm was done already. Harpo was playing, yeah.
And I got to tell you, Randy Natoli, if you saw him, you'd be like, that guy's first-team All-American? You're like, no, I don't know. But he gets out on the field. He's not the fastest guy. He was quick. But like Vinny said, a knowledge of the game. And then Harpo would beat somebody and give to Vinny, and then Vinny would, you know, double team. And then Steven would end up 3 goals. We win the club championship in 96, 97. And Steven was outstanding in those both those games.
Yeah.
And that was against Mount Washington, by the way.
So, yeah, I want to get there. But with the roster stuff.
I apologize, Team Toyota. But that was the,
okay.
The new name.
Now, sticking with the roster, and maybe Coach Beroza, you can help with this one. So, there's 2 guys I want to specifically talk about. I mean, the research I saw, I looked at maybe 50 guys that were a part of the Long Island Lacrosse Club. 40 of them are in the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Like insane. And you already spoke to it. Like 10 starters, 8 starters were on the world team at one point. But 2 guys. One, I saw Mark Millen played for both the Mount Washington and for Long Island Lacrosse Club. Maybe Beroza, can you speak a little bit to that? Like I feel like that's sacrilegious a little bit.
No. So Mark graduated UMass, and then he moved back to Long Island before he moved to Baltimore for his life and career. And so he came to play for Long Island. And it was really funny. If Mark ever listens to this, he'll be upset with me, but that's okay. He was a great player, and probably one of the fastest Vinny players I've ever seen. Quickest, fast, speed-wise, and he could go lefty-righty, and he was strong. And he wasn't huge, but he played for us. And he only played 1 year. He played in 94. And we won the club championship. And we're playing against Mount Washington. And that was the year that Skip Lickfuss announced his retirement. He said, "I'm retiring after this game." And I think they expected to win the championship. It was a rainy day down at Hopkins.
Hopkins, yeah.
Yeah. And, I can go through, again, vivid memories. Vinny, you and me, our memories are really good about remembering who was on the field and who played who. So Dave Petramalo was covering Mark Millen on close D, and Mark was an attackman. And I said, "Mark, come on off the field, through the box. He goes, "Coach," he was yelling at me. "I don't want to come off the field." I go, and I used some expletives. "Mark, come off the field." I put somebody else down and low. I said, "Let Dave Petramalo cover somebody that's not as good as you. You burn somebody at midfield, whether it's an LSM or it's a defensive midi." I said, "Your speed and everything else, and even if you don't get the goal, you'll get the assist." First time it happens, Dave Petramalo strips him. He goes, "Hey, Coach, I told you it wasn't going to work." And I'm like, you know what? I did it again and again and again. And you know what? We won the game I don't know, 12-6 or something. And
Yeah.
Mark had a great game. Vinny, go ahead.
Mark was the MVP of the game. It was a phenomenal matchup. You're talking about two of the best guys to ever do it, in Dave and what he did. Petramala, he's, in anybody's book, he's top 5 all time, if not number 1. And then you have, Mark, who had a phenomenal career, who, like Bill said, explosive player. I don't think we win the championship that year if we don't have Millen on the team. I mean, we actually played in another rain game at night at North Hempstead. We were playing New York AC, and Steve Mitchell was playing for them. He was guarding Millen, and he guarded him tough. But Mark, Randy Natoli, who we call Harpo, we mentioned before, he got the MVP of the game because at halftime he gave Millen his cleats because it was very slippery. And then as soon as Millen had traction, it was over. Mitchell was sliding all over. He had some traction. I think he scored 5 goals in the second half, and we won that game that night, which put us into the finals. And then ultimately we did beat Mount Washington that year. They really had a stacked team. They were really good. Cool. And it was kind of a brutal game. It was more of a defensive game. We used to play in a lot of high-scoring games because we had a lot of firepower. But that particular game, they were very strong on defense. We were very strong. Goals didn't come easy that day. Ground balls were at a premium. Guys, that's why I say, you can look at box scores, look back at history, and I remember things a little differently because I remember plays that guys made that, like, okay, this guy had 3 goals, but this guy made the play that, he came up with a ground ball. I don't know how he got it, and that led to that goal, So those are the kind of winning plays. And that was, another element of our team. Like, we self-policed. If you were out there, like, playing for yourself, you got abused by everybody on our team. We didn't care who it was. It didn't matter. You could be all world. If you started playing like that, you got abused,
Sure.
And there were guys and we argued with each other a lot, on the sideline. There were guys who came onto our team and they were like shell-shocked. They were like, this is how you guys are on this team? We're like, yeah, we hold people accountable. It doesn't matter who it is. And some guys can't take that. They're like, hey, listen, I'm out of college. I'm here to have fun, get some exercise. These guys are yelling at me. But we were so competitive. We wanted to win. We took it seriously. And, and another part of it, I just wanted to, before I forget, that year that they kept me on the roster and I played in 79, it was the tail end of the careers of some of the guys Bill played with more years. Ronnie Frazier, Tom Postel, Mike Durrell, Stan Kowalski. These guys are legends in the game. They're all in the Hall of Fame. But the one thing I really appreciated from those guys, they were constantly, like, if you wanted to listen, if they saw you were interested in learning, they like to impart wisdom to you in how to play the game, and I tried to do the same over all the years I played because I got that knowledge from there. You pass it on. That's how you can make a strong team. Now, there are some guys that resist things. There are some guys that not as fast learners as other guys. But for the most part, what made our team strong is because, if Bill's talking to a goalie or if he's talking to any, they're going to respect it because they know his history, his background, the whole bit, Totally. And we've been through those wars. We've seen this before. Everything old is, everything old is new again at some point. Sure. But it's just like, not a sore subject a little bit. The U.S. under-20 team, they just lost a game to Canada, which Canada had a game plan that, okay, they executed their game plan. They maybe didn't have the talent of the U.S., but they slowed the game down, which we were known for doing when we thought we were outmanned, and we won those games. And, I think the biggest takeaway for me you could always lose a game. I'm not looking to beat those kids up. I'm sure they played their hearts out, and it just was a little off day for them maybe, and Canada had a good game plan and executed it. But, history, like I said, tends to repeat itself. When you go back to 2014, when the men's national team lost in Denver, they did the same thing. And somebody wrote an article on Inside Lacrosse, I think Terry Foy, saying, yeah, I saw an article. Yeah, they're saying about that the game plan was similar. Now, if you follow history, you might know that in that game, the U.S. was down, the men's team in 14. What happened was they made their comeback when they started to use a 10-man ride. They started to pressure Canada and turn them over and got back in the game and then getting into a closer game. And apparently that's what happened in this U20 game, that, they were down, and then at the end they made a little bit of a run by pressuring them. So, that's why I say you look back at games and game plans and you say, okay, what if they come in with this game plan of a slowdown? How are we going to speed the game up? Let's not wait till the fourth quarter to speed the game up. Let's do it from Jump Street and see what they got. Maybe we wear them down. We get ahead. They start to press. So, but we've been on that side of it. When Bill was coaching them, we beat the great Toyota team. Sure. We knew we couldn't go up and down with that team. If that game was played with a shot clock, we probably can't win that game. I don't know that we would, being honest, because they were so much deeper. We only played with like 15 guys.
That's all we had.
Right?
We had a limited bench, and we had Gordon Purdy taking laps around the field, and Vinny and trying to tire Gary and Paul Gate out back then. Yeah. And we slowed it down. They were getting frustrated. They're coming out and they're trying to double team, triple team, take the ball. And we got a couple goals, and then we've got a lead. So that you talk about history, Vinny. I mean, I think Gary and Paul and the coaching staff from the Canadians probably remember that lesson from '96.
Yeah.
When that game against them, they said we got to slow it down. And so, it worked out. It worked out great for us.
Now, speaking of history, another guy that I want to learn about personally, other than him being on the probably the original all-name team, Cookie Krongard. And I know in your bio, Vinny, you won the Krongard Award, which is basically the top player in the club at that year, right? So is that the same family, same guy? Can you guys educate me a little bit on who Cookie was and sort of what he brought to the field and to Long Island lacrosse?
So Cookie Krongard was a goalie when I first showed up in Long Island in '78 for my first year out of Roanoke, and he was a goalie. And they had lost the championship in '77, so I think the coach was looking for what's gonna help us win the championship in '78. And I was fortunate to play with great guys. I mean, Vinny's named them all, and Dave Devine was a defenseman at Cornell, as well as Mike Farrell, even Don Del Giorno out of Penn, like some incredible players. Jimmy Burke, John Pirro, that was the defense, and they're all first-team All-Americans. I wasn't, but they were. But Cookie was a goalie on that team, and I showed up, and he's like, who's this guy? And he and I became very good friends, and he was a mentor. Matter of fact, he was such a mentor that he was a very positive influence for my nomination to the National Hall of Fame. And so when Vinny talked about relationships and camaraderie and learning, Cookie wasn't offended at all by me. But he won a national championship at Princeton when they didn't have the championships, but they, based on the record, they would win. And so Cookie had an illustrious career. He's in the National Hall of Fame, and they announced the Krongard Award after him. He just passed away about a year and a half ago. He was playing up until 80 or 80 plus years old. And we actually had a Team Israel scrimmage in New York against like New York AC or something. And Cookie was playing in goal. Everybody's like, "You're gonna hurt this guy." You know what? He would take a shot in his helmet, in his chest, wherever. And you know what? He was still pretty damn good at 80 years old. But Vinny, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, Cookie was fearless for jumping in the goal. I had two nephews that played at Princeton. As a Princeton guy, they used to in the fall have an alumni game, and he jumped in the cage, and they had some guys who could really bring the heat. And I laughed. I had a nephew, Jeff Fricaro, who shot the ball really hard, and he took a shot like inside the restraining line, and it was fast. And Cookie never moved. I don't even think he thought he shot it yet. He was still saying ball front center, and the ball was already behind him. It was off cage. And my nephew came off, and I was standing like near the side. I said, "Are you crazy? Don't shoot like that with this guy in there. You can kill him." But he really was a dedicated guy to the Long Island Lacrosse Club. He went over to Europe for a while. I think he worked in England, right, Bill? Didn't he work? Yeah. He worked in finance markets. He helped guys get jobs. He was a mentor. He did so much in that regard. He was just such a gentleman. And, Listen,
He's a Baltimore family. That's where he's from originally.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So also he had a brother, that also was involved in lacrosse. That was a great player also. That was a big finance guy. Used to hire a lot of lacrosse players coming out of college and stuff like that. They're just a very noteworthy family, good people that loved the sport. And so he was Cookie. The brother was Buzzy Krongard. Yeah. So that award is not actually even for like an MVP or Player of the Year or something like that. The Krongard Award is more like an accumulation of all the years you played. Like you've been around a long time. We'll give you something. I always said when they gave that to me, they were trying to tell me something. Get off the field. You're done. Like you stink now. You're finished.
Oh, man.
There's a good group of people that won that award. I never got that, but there were people, a lot of good players that got that award.
Yeah.
Well deserved, Vinny, too.
Yeah, no, it was a longevity thing, but it also was, in terms of leadership and stuff like that, and what you did in club lacrosse. So it was an honor to receive it, to tell you the truth.
Vinny, it sounds a little bit like I think I was reading up that you partnered with your buddy Metzger to give out it might be called the Metzger Award or something for the high school.
He has the Metzger Awards. He does a number of awards. Jim has been very successful in his career. He started from ground up. He was bartending somewhere, and a guy told him, you got a way about you. I think you could do well in sales in the insurance business. And he started to work in the guide end. His mentor told him, I think, you could do this on your own. And Jim started with one other person, built his company into a monster, and he has been very good in giving back. He's afforded a lot of things to people in the lacrosse world, not only what he did at Hofstra, but in general. But when you talk about, we give awards for MVPs of the county and Long Island championships. We give leadership awards. Doesn't necessarily have to be the best player on a team, and that's picked by the coaches and the players of that team. Somebody they think in that way, in that regard, and that's a nice award. And he's very good with the publicity of it and everything. And it's really added a lot to Nassau, and not only Nassau lacrosse, but really Long Island lacrosse. He does it in both Nassau and Suffolk. Yeah. So I'll if the games are at separate fields, like I'll handle giving out some of the awards, at Nassau, and Rob Pinnell or James Pinnell, which are his nephews, they'll handle the Suffolk awards.
Nice.
So. Look, that's the thing about lacrosse. Bill will tell you, the generosity of people who want to see the game succeed and to want to see the people coming after us have the same, not only success, doesn't necessarily mean you could have a phenomenal career and have a lot of fun and never win a championship. But as Mr. Beroza used to say, Mort Beroza used to say, if you're going to play the game, you might as well win. He said, you're going to play the game, you might as well win. I always remembered that.
Sure. Well, so
Max, congratulations to you, Max, too, because you just won a gold medal for Team Israel at the European Championships. Sorry, Vinny, but he just defeated Team Italy in the finals.
I saw that. You're very lucky my nephews didn't go play for Team Italy.
Very lucky, because we were only one goal better than them that day. So if they came.
They've been asking them about playing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of winning, so I went back with the help of Coach Beroza. I went back and looked at championships from 1967 and probably till about the end. I want to talk a little bit about it from what I could find. It looked like Long Island won 15 club championships. Mount Washington won 8. And maybe if you had Toyota in there, maybe they were at 10. But you both were part of many of those. Would love to hear from both of you about one that sticks out to you. Just kind of maybe it doesn't have to be your favorite one, but one that just like sits with both of you that might have been sort of, the most memorable.
I think I'll let Bill go first, but I'm thinking they'll probably overlap in some of them, but I can name 3 for me.
Okay.
But look, I'll let Bill go first.
Yeah. Well, I had visions as a coach winning 96, 97. That was incredible against Team Toyota or Mount Washington. But as a player, probably 1980 for me. I got the MVP of that game, but, it could have gone to Joe Taylor, Vinny, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember
Joe Taylor, he passed away. He had 3 goals in that game. Hofstra guy. from Sachem High School, and Joe was incredible that game. But we stepped on that field, and I think everybody on the MLC team was first team All-American. From their attack and Greavy and Hines, and the list goes on and on. And Kevin Mahan in the goal, and their defense, etc. But we won that game on a dirt field that had more rocks and more dirt than it had grass, and it was a dust storm. And just remembering the game and how hard we played, and Eamon McEnany, I think Eamon was on that 80 team as well.
He was, yes.
Yeah, Eamon McEnany and Tom Postel, and I remember Kevin Huff, who was a 1,000-yard rusher at Hofstra in football, literally running over Doug Radaball. And he ran over him so much that he actually stepped on his chest as he kept running toward the ball. And I'm not saying it was on purpose or not.
No, I think that was Tony Patillo, and I think it was on purpose.
Okay, was it Tony? But 78 was amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Vinny, what about you?
The games that I remember, obviously the one Bill talked about, that 96 championship against Toyota, we were considered big underdogs. We were, outmanned. We only, like I said, I think 15.
Can I interrupt you? I have to interrupt you. Lee Felsmo on TV said before the game, he goes, "Can you guys just keep it close because it's on TV? It'll be really boring if they kill you." Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So that's about how it was going because, in this, we won a semifinal game against a team from Rochester in the last minute. We actually had to come from behind to win that game, and we did. And they were playing right after us. Toyota was playing Brine. Brine had beaten us during the season by a goal. It was one of our only losses, and I think it was our only loss. But we didn't have everybody there that day, But they beat us, and that goes for everybody in club. People are always missing people, but they beat us that day. So we said, well, this might be a good barometer to see how they do against Toyota. Well, we watched for about the first 15 minutes, and I think they were up 10-0. And we said, we saw enough. And that's when we went back to the hotel and said, we better have a game plan here, or else, we could get run off by these guys. They were so deep. And like I said, the game plan of holding the ball and frustrating them that way came to fruition. And so when you're that much of what people perceived as an underdog, although I didn't really believe we would have much of an underdog, because our first 10 were as good as any first 10, It's just that they were much deeper.
Sure.
But, that was a great one. Another one that sticks out in my mind was when we were down to the Maryland Lacrosse Club in 1985.
Yes.
And these games matter not only because you want to win that particular championship, but at that time, whose ever team won, that coach got to be the winning coach got to be the coach of the USA team, or one of the coaches, which actually will help you in the tryouts. Let's face it, if you got a coach there, it helps guys, So we're playing, and we had a great year that year. We had lost the year before to MLC. I thought we had a great team the year before, but they did beat us. Unfortunately, we always had to travel down there and play. They only came up once in all the years I ever played. In 81 is the only time they ever come up here to play the championship. But we're playing them at Hopkins, and we're down big with not a lot of time left. Right? Go ahead.
We were down 7 with 7 minutes to go in the game, Vinny. Yeah. And trust me, so you said a lot. I just want to put it in perspective. 7 goals. There's no shot clock. You could get called for stalling, but we finally started winning some face-offs. We were losing. But Doug Hall, and I'll let you finish the story, but we came back, tied the game. We won 21-20. And
in overtime.
I never gave up 20 goals in my life, and let alone won a game.
And won.
And won a game. But Doug Hall was the man, UNC, Levittown guy. But that game, Vinny, I should have said that one because
that to me was a game that stuck out in my mind because I just remember it was a little. Bill was right when he says 7-goal deficit with that much time, but it was still like a 4-goal deficit with like 2.5 minutes, and I remember I looked up at the scoreboard And we had just scored, and I'm on the wing of the faceoff, and I'm saying to myself, how did they beat us again like this? I don't, this is crazy. How did we lose this game? And I said, I said to myself, just keep playing hard. Who knows what can happen? Next thing you know, we catch fire, and Dougie Hall puts in 2 goals. Eddie Hughes puts in a goal. And next thing you know, we got a tie game, and we're heading to overtime. And we get the ball in overtime, and Norm Engelke inverts. He's a midi who takes the ball on the end line, does his little hop step, and he feeds Dougie Hall cutting through the crease, and he scores the winning goal. We win 21-20. And that enabled Tom Postel to be an assistant coach for the USA team.
Wow.
So that was one that sticks out to me. And then I have to tell you one that sticks out to me that we lost. And it was down in Baltimore again, and we were playing MLC, and it was a battle. It was a tight game the whole way. They were ahead most of the game. We came back, and we were down 1, and we called timeout.
What year was this?
This was 85, I think.
No, 85 we won. That's when we
won. 85 we won. It might have been the year before, 84. Might have been 84. And so we were down 1. Somebody took a shot. It went out of bounds, and Tommy Postel was coaching. And we came in the huddle, and he said, these are the 6 guys I want out there. And I'm a midi, but he told me, you start with the ball behind, and I'm like, okay. And he's thinking, Tommy was funny. If he wasn't smoking a cigarette during the thing, he was like on one knee on the ground thinking, and he always got everybody's name wrong and stuff like that. He just was great. And he looks at me, he goes, I told you who's out there. And he goes, Vinnie, start with the ball on the end line. Just score a goal and we'll win in overtime. And everybody starts laughing like just score a goal and we'll go in overtime. And I was like it was like going to be automatic, And I remember I picked it up on the end line, and I don't want to say who I beat, it would be embarrassing. But I beat the guy, and I scored with 5 seconds to go, and we get into overtime. So now I'm like, oh man, this is a miracle. And so we go into overtime, and on the face-off, Eddie Wallace, who's a great player, played with me at Hofstra. He was a vacuum cleaner. He could run, too. He's like a squatty built guy, but he could really run. And he scooped the ball, and he started coming down. And he used to score. When we were in college together, he used to put the ball in the goal. He outscored our whole third midfield. And he comes running down, and I said, Eddie's going to win the game. He puts them in. And a guy was chasing, Gary Klipp, who played on the U.S. team with us. He he threw his stick at him as he shot it. It hit his stick, and the ball went over the goal, but they called a penalty. So we went on an extra man, and we had a 30-second penalty, and we called timeout. We had our extra man was deadly, but to their credit, they shut off the ball from getting behind to Bobby Engelke, who was really the feeder. And, 30-second penalty goes quick. It went, and from the defensive side, who was going to come over to play defense was Jimmy D'Arcangelo, and Tony Patillo was covering him, and he yelled to me, penalty, he's coming down. I had the ball up top, so I pulled it out as he came running past me, and Postel said sub, because we had certain guys on the extra man that were like just extra man. Mike Borriello was on. Right. And he said, come off, and he's making him sub off, and for whatever reason, the Maryland Lacrosse guy was going with him, subbing with him. So now it was a 5-on-5. I got the ball up top. Darky, who I love, is covering me, but I was like, sorry, Darky, I got to end this thing, And I split dodge him. I went right by him. And as I was coming in, Kevin Mahan, he ran out at me as I started to shoot it. And he ran out at me, and I shot it right into his stick. He threw an outlet to Darky. He ran down, threw it to Cottle. Cottle scored the goal, and we lost. So, like they say, sometimes the ones you lose hurt more and you remember more.
Oh, yeah.
That one always stays with me, that I had that game in my hands and I didn't come through. And I felt so terrible because we were undefeated that year, the whole bit, And
that was 84?
It might have
been 84. I think you're right.
It might have been 83 or 84. 83 or 84, yeah. But it was a one, when you have the game in your hands like that, and I had played such a good game that night, and I had that was one year that I was player of the year and everything. So it was like it would have capped off everything for the season. And
I'm still upset with you. I'm still upset with you, Vinny.
I think a lot of guys are. They still sometimes guys remind me of that. Remember that time you shot it in the guy's stick? But listen, you got to take the bad with the good with the bad.
Totally.
I should have made a save on Cottle, but he was a pretty good player.
Nah, it was 1-on-1. It wasn't much of a chance there like that. But I should have scored on the other end is the bottom line, you know.
You mentioned something interesting, how the winning coach got to be part of the U.S. staff. It brought me back a little bit. Again, we're going to go history before your guys' playing days, but 1967, I think, Mount Washington was awarded the USCLA title, which gave them the privilege of playing in that inaugural World Championship to represent the U.S., like the entire team.
Right.
From what I saw, Long Island Lacrosse Club was the runner-up that year. Do you guys have any knowledge of sort of what happened that year? Was it contested? Was it just didn't win enough games? And then I think from what I saw I think there was like a New York Times article in that same year, Long Island Lacrosse Club ended up playing Australia and blew the doors off of them. So it was like two teams that probably could have gone and represented the U.S. with success.
Yeah, no, the whole process was different then, right? How they chose who's representing USA. It was that simple. There was no tryout system, and there wasn't going to be any college, even if there was a great college player. You know, Frank Urso, you know, but he wasn't in college at 67. But I mean, first team All-American 4 times. A guy like that probably could have made the USA team, but there were you don't see any college guys making the USA team because when you graduate and you're as good as you were in college, you're probably even better now in the pros, and there's so many players. But again, the rules have changed and how they do the tryout system.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, the selections, look, for good or for bad, that's what it is. You know, they're trying to. It's evolved over the years, you know. But you know, we're here talking about the Long Island Lacrosse Club, and I will tell you, the Long Island Lacrosse Club, Long Island Hofstra Lacrosse Club, has always been, you know, strongly represented on any of those national type teams, other than when they allowed a whole team just to go and they picked the team, you know. But when it was a tryout situation, you know, I would say, I don't know if there was any time there was any less than 30% to 40% of players that were from the 1 year I played. It was like Long Island and Maryland Lacrosse Club, predominantly the whole team, you know. So you know, they had the same thing going on down there, and it made a great rivalry. And I do remember the early part of, I think they had beaten us in '82 when we played in the World Games that year. Remember, they beat us in the championship that year, right before the World Games started. And I remember an article saying, you know, Maryland Lacrosse Club, team of the 80s. And I'm like, it's only 1982, you know, the team of the 80s, you know. And when all was said and done, we won more championships than anybody in the 80s.
Totally.
So, you know, but not to take anything away from them. They were, you know, we were like mirror images. Mount Washington was more of like the old guard. You know, Maryland Lacrosse Club through that 80s was really more of a powerhouse than Mount Washington, I think.
So, yeah, so that 82 World Game, Vinny, you were talking about sort of you guys lost in the club championship that year, and was that the team that went in 82, or was that just because their coach got to go, he took a lot of his guys?
No, that team was picked in 81.
Got it.
That team was picked already. It's just that both teams that played in that championship game, you know, us and MLC, the majority of the team played on one of those two teams. So here we were playing against each other. I remember we played. It was a rainy game. We lost. Guys went out after, you know, blowing off steam. But they had a practice for us that next morning after the championship game, early in the morning too. We had to be in the locker room like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and they ran us a little ragged. They knew we were out, and they were like, "We got to start from now. We got to get ready," you know. And you know, we basically stayed down in Baltimore from after that game because the World Games were like right after that. And of course, here you are, you want to kill the guy the night before. Now the guy's your teammate, and you're figuring out how you're going to beat Canada or whoever else. Actually, we didn't even play Canada in the finals that year. We played Australia in the finals. They upset Canada. They were very good, Australia. They had excellent players.
Wow.
And they beat Canada. I don't know if Canada overlooked them or whatever, but they were very good. And by the time Australia got to us in the finals, they had some injuries. I think we caused some injuries. Our team's very physical. Guys were knocking guys all over the place. And it wasn't much of a championship game. We probably won that game by 8 or 10 goals, I think. Right, Bill?
Yeah.
Well, so, okay, I want to bring it back to Long Island Lacrosse Cup. One, was there a watering hole that some legendary spot after games that the fellas would go and retell stories? I want to hear a little bit about that. That's the fun stuff.
Those changed over the years, but Bill's Meadowbrook was right next to Hofstra University. We'd go in there. Phil Marino, who played at Hofstra and was a great player for us as well. And,
also a USA player.
USA team player, yeah. But Phil owned a bar called Hawk's Nest, so we'd go there. I think even RDC Camp owned a bar in Huntington. We go to his place, but mostly Hawk's Nest after games. And then as Seth Tierney, who's the Hofstra coach, I think as Seth played for us, and then he bought a bar. And then years later, we go to Seth's bar. Those are the ones that I remember, Vinny.
Yeah, I think at that time, at late 70s, 80s, it was mostly Bill's Meadowbrook because it was convenient. You showered after the game, you walked across the street, and you were in the bar. The food was pretty good. The game, we usually play either 1 or 2 o'clock, and game was over by 3:30, 4, shower up, and you weren't getting home till midnight. Guys spent the next 6 hours in the bar.
Did Bill's Meadowbrook have any odes to you guys on the wall? Do we have a stick up there? We have team photos up there. Were they at Lacrosse bar?
They didn't really have things like that up there, but it was a known place that we went to. But what was interesting, Bill's Meadowbrook, and Bill knows this. He played with a team when I first came across Bill. I knew who he was, but the first time I ever played against him, he was playing for Preston Brady Construction in the Freeport Summer League. And one of the top teams that also played in that summer league was Bill's Meadowbrook. They had a team. They sponsored the team. So, there were a lot of teams in that league. There were different divisions. We were in the A division, which was the toughest. And any one weekend you went down there, you could see the best of the best playing lacrosse. It was an incredible summer league, that I think a lot of guys cut their teeth there. If you weren't something in Freeport Summer League, you were really a real player. We didn't care what you did in college. Okay, now come to Freeport. Let's see what you got.
Not a Long Island Lacrosse Club story, Vinny, but funny. So playing with Preston Brady, we're in the finals one year, and my defense is a guy named Brian Kingston. You're like, who? Jimmy Burke played on 3 USA teams. Robert Mongaluzzi, who played at Penn, right? But not. Successful attorney, great guy, played at Huntington High School. That's our defense, and then me in the goal. It's the finals, and all of a sudden, and I won't use any expletives, but their team takes the field, and Robert Mongaluzzi, we call Mongo. Mongo goes to Burke. He said, Burke said to Mongo, who do you want to cover? And Mongo says, what the F does it matter? It was Eamon McEnany, Mike O'Neill, and Tommy Marino, all first-team All-American, Hall of Fame. It's like, and their midfield was no different. They had Bobby Hendrickson, and it was the Cornell 1976-77 national championship team.
Yeah, it was a stacked team. It was like, these guys only weeks before were playing for the national championship on television, and now here you were in Freeport Summer League, and that's why I say, if you didn't make all Freeport, who the hell were you?
Well, so hold on. Tell me a little bit more about this Freeport League. What was like? So Freeport was the summer. When was the club season? They didn't overlap. Obviously, there were different parts of the year. It was in the spring. It mirrored the club season, mirrored the college season. But to tell you about Freeport, the 2 guys who ran Freeport were Tom Flatley, who coached the Long Island Lacrosse Club, and John Phillips, who was
John was more than just, he was a general manager, so to speak, but he helped coach too. You know, he was involved in that. He was a guy on the sideline. He had dual roles, but those guys were the ones I think started the Freeport Summer League. There was 3 games would be played at the same time. It was this big open field, not a lot of grass on it. By the summer, the grass had burned off, very dusty, hot as could be. You know, and there was like a 12, 2, and 4 were the games, and 3. So there'd be like 9 games on Saturday, 9 games on Sunday, is how it was. And there was a lot of good lacrosse there, believe me. You know, Dom Starja, who's seen it all. I mean, he coached 40, 50 years. He wrote an article about his time in lacrosse, and a big part of his article was talking about Freeport and saying, you know, you had to be something there if you were going to be anybody, you know. Who's this guy? He's the first team All-American. Yeah, but is he all Freeport? And then because a lot of guys maybe didn't have an opportunity because they worked, or some guys who didn't work, people like to go to the Hamptons on the weekend. You know, you'd have guys flying in from the Hamptons for a 4:00 game on a Sunday, coming back from the Hamptons because they wanted to, you know, make sure that they, you know, played their game. But that's when Caniac Park, which still has a summer league, Caniac said, okay, we'll do a night league at Caniac, and that'll cover the guys who maybe don't get a chance to play all the time on the weekend. So a lot of the teams that played in Freeport also played at Caniac. So that league developed into something. The competition there was, you know, and then Freeport ultimately ended. And then Caniac has existed now. I think they're in their 42nd, over 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're going strong. And I take a ride there some nights. They got 2 turf fields. It's so upgraded from when we played there. Again, you know, when we play dirt field, crappy lights, the whole bit. You know, now they're on nice turf fields with great lighting.
That's awesome.
And they really do a great job. On any given night, you'll see a load of college Division I athletes, All-Americans, and the whole bit.
So yeah, I remember Vinny playing a game there, Max, and I think it was the semifinals, maybe the finals one year. It was against Kevin Huff's team, Brandywine, something like that. And I had my old Roanoke mask, and there was no bar down the middle. It was just straight across, very pliable metal, and the bar was almost touching my nose because that's what you wore, right? And no throat protector, nothing. And Richie Wayman, who went to Navy, took a shot in that game, and it went into my mask, went through my mask, hit me in the eye. I went down like I'd been shot with a shotgun.
Wow.
And somebody goes, but again, you know, you're playing all these incredible. It was muddy field. My brother was there, who was the veterinarian. He comes out, he goes, "You okay?" And I go, "Yeah, I can see," and everything. They go, "Okay."
That's awesome. I mean, I'm curious with this Freeport League, with all these stories, and I want to tie this back in a little bit, but you had mentioned, so it's Long Island Lacrosse Club's playing on Sundays and then the spring. Summertime, the Freeport League. But summertime was, you had like the sponsors, right? You talked about the bar sponsoring a team, some construction company sponsoring a team. What were some of the other local establishments that had teams in that Freeport League that were sort of supporting the fellas?
It mostly were bars. Well, because people, they wanted to get business after the game. They knew guys would come back, but there was like Esquires and there was a bunch of teams like that. But the most of the teams were Antiques that the Huffs played for. Antiques was another bar in Suffolk County. Park Bench was Ward Melville guys. It was a bar. I mean, it's just bar guys. One of the few teams that wasn't a bar was the team I was playing for, which was, you know, from Port Washington. We were like Port Tigers or something one year. And then Harvey Cohen ran the thing. And finally, Chris Kane one day says, "Why are we calling it that? Let's just call it Harvey's Lacrosse Club." And we became Harvey's Lax Club was the team for many years after that. You know, and the bar for us was Harvey's house. Exactly. Yeah, we used to go after. He had a big pool in the backyard. He'd have a keg after every game. And we literally go from, so the game we play at 4, the game was over by, you got to Harvey's like 6:30 coming home. and you'd be at Harvey's. We'd play water polo. We'd be drinking, and you had badminton in the back and the whole bit. And then at like 10:30, 11, guys were like, "Where are we gonna go?" It's like, "Go home and change." And then we'd go out Sunday night, and almost everybody had to work the next day. You barely slept. But that
we used to go to OBI, Oak Beach Inn.
OBI, yeah, people would go. Those were the hot spots. Like Sunday nights, these places were still going strong. Sunday was a big bar night, like club night, I should say, more than just bar. These were clubs, and that's what we used to do. That was the routine. I don't know. We didn't get a lot of sleep back then, I can tell you that.
Coach Beroza,
Coach
Beroza, who was your Freeport Summer League team? Were you on the Harveys?
I played for Preston Brady, and then I played for a construction company. So it wasn't a bar. Then it became, what was the bar in Huntington? Pub. Finnegan's Pub.
Finnegan's that's your team became. So I'll tell you a funny story. I come out of high school. Billy is already an established player, and another established player, from Port Washington at least, was Chris Kane, who ended up a USA captain, two-timer, and he was two-time Schmeisser Cup winner, best defenseman in the country, defenseman of the year, played on all those great Cornell teams, lost one game in his whole career in college. In his last game, they lost to Hopkins, broke their 42-game win streak. And Chris was on our team, and he was playing midfield. And I remember Billy in the goal chatting him up, like, shoot the ball, Kane. I think after that, what he did that day as a midfielder, that's when he turned into a defenseman right after that, But Chris was a great athlete, a great lacrosse player. And I remember Billy being in the goal, and they had Maimone facing off, and they were a team. They were the team to beat, really. I think you guys won it that year. But we played you to like a one-goal game. We were really in a good game with you guys. And I remember walking over, we were disappointed losing. And as we're walking, and I remember a couple guys who were watching the game saying, man, we got to keep an eye on these guys. This is young guys. I mean, I was just out of high school. I think I played 1 year at Hofstra. I think I had just played my freshman year. We mostly had Barry Cohen, Roger Sexhow, Rylan Hugh. We were all like, 1 year out, and that gave us confidence. We were like, we played this team pretty tough. This is a mature team that's won the championship before. And I'd never forget that guy saying, we got to keep an eye on this team. And we won a couple times after that. We did win championships.
What's funny is Max, when you read the resume, Vinny and myself starting off, next podcast we do, I want to make sure I include Freeport in that, okay?
Oh, yeah. Freeport titles.
Yeah, you got to get Freeport titles matter. Yeah, listen.
Oh, we can add Vail too, Vinny. Vail,
If we start counting all those things, we'll be here all day. I think one time for fun, we were counting up all of those summer leagues and that, and I think I was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 championships
So to bring it back to clubs, so Freeport has all these bars and construction companies that are sponsoring teams. Obviously, Team Toyota was I assume Mount Washington, or were they Maryland Lacrosse Club, or is it all kind of the same?
Yeah, they're not playing in this. This is
right.
Just strictly like
sure.
They had summer leagues down there.
In fact, they had heroes.
Yeah, a couple of years we went down there and played our All-Star team from Freeport, played the Maryland All-Star team. They came up here 1 year, then we went down. Then I think we did it for about 3 years, and then guys were like, I don't want to make the drive.
Yeah.
But I think for 3 years we did it.
Sure, but the club piece, Team Toyota, obviously I would assume that Toyota came in, threw a bunch of money probably at the Gate Brothers so that they could play and have a car to rip around. Did Long Island Lacrosse Club ever have any of those conversations? Maybe there was a car dealership or something.
Anybody was like, I'll come play for you for something, we tell them, I think you better find another team. Get out of here. We just, we didn't have that kind of,
sure.
we had a good group of guys. We always had, I look at it this way in terms of like my career, like the year I was out of school and I played with Long Island, then came back to Long Island where, when I came back, Ronnie pretty much retired and all, but I got to play a year with those legends of that time. That was an experience for me, and they taught me how to play the game the right way. And then I come out of school and there's a group of guys my age and maybe a year older and a year younger, the Norman Engel Keys, Randy Natoli, Matt Crowley, John Driscoll, Brendan didn't play for us until later. But we had this nucleus of guys on the Long Island team that came back year after year for like an 8-year run. And that gave us consistency and made us good year in and year out. Now 8 years goes by. That's about the shelf life of most guys in club, to be honest with you, And then they're gone. Then the next crew comes in. Then there was the next group of guys that I played with. And then my brother came in because he's 10 years younger than me. And so I started with those guys. And then the Lowe brothers came onto our team, and Panetta and Pat McCabe. And, you could just keep going down the list. But I was fortunate enough to play in, I got to play 1 year in the late 70s, the 80s, 90s, and right up to 2001. So I saw a lot of the changing of, and guys came onto our team, they had a specific purpose. We would get more guys come out for our team the year of the tryout for the USA team, because I think they had an idea like, I'll play for Long Island, I have a better chance of maybe making the world team. So we went in 96 when we won that championship against Toyota, playing with like 15 guys with basically a midfield and a half, if you even want to call it that. Right. And then all of a sudden the next year, we pick up Roy Colsey, Stephen Huff, Eric Saramet. You could go down the list. These are all top guys, but they all came onto our team for that year.
Wow.
And of course, Toyota, they even picked up more guys too. And we still were able to beat them that next year again, even though that was a funny game too, because, the year before we got out to a lead, and we took the air out of the ball, so to speak. But that year we had the horses to go up and down too, and they were going up and down a little better than us. I think we got down like 8-1 or something. It wasn't looking too good, but then we got going. We caught fire. It was played up in Syracuse, and we came back and we beat them by a goal.
Wow.
And yeah, that was some game.
Now, it's interesting talking about Freeport being in the summer, club being in the spring, and mirroring the college game. I'm curious your guys' take with the MLL and the PLL, that sort of progression. They've always had a summer schedule. Do you guys think they would have any success going back to mirroring the college and playing it in the spring like y'all used to do with the club schedule?
It's an interesting question, but and because everybody's out of college, out of school, right? So they just have work. So could you do it then? You could, but I think there's too many conflicts with the fan base that potentially would show up to see it, because I'm going to a college, whether D1, 2, 3, doesn't matter, JUCO, I'm going to that game. That's my commitment, my kids, everything going on. So I think they picked a season that makes the most sense for the old MLL and then the PLL.
Sure.
Yeah, I think what also plays into it is, forget about, the fans who show up for the games. From a TV standpoint, you got to remember college basketball, March Madness, you got all of that going on at the same time. You're not going to compete with that, you know.
Sure.
And so this is probably the best time that they all playing. Look, I trust that Rabel has looked at every friggin' analytic there is, because he's a thorough guy, and the people who work for him and his brother, and the people, work, they're very conscious of all these things. I give them a lot of credit for constantly trying to tweak it into the best model they can. I think I like the rules. I like a lot of things of it, and the play is considering, we've never had it where the sport is a real, like in terms of a professional sport where you're practicing every day. You take these guys now and you let them practice every day like they did in college. Forget what this game could look like. Right. It's just nobody has an ability. The most that guys are doing is a guy who might be coaching somewhere and he's got a stick in his hand every day and he's training on his own. But it's not like you're playing with the team you're playing with every day.
Right.
If you did that, because if you do see the game, if you're an astute fan, and you watch it, turnovers are part of lacrosse. That's the game, but there's a lot of sloppiness in some of these games that I see, and I just attribute that to, them not playing as much as they could be, not or should be. But
it's still an entertaining value.
I think the game is phenomenal. they do freakish plays. The skill level is off the charts. The athleticism, you can see the speed, you can see the strength of some of these guys. They're lifting guys off the ground, throwing them. It really. I enjoy it. I watch all the games. I do.
It's awesome.
I just, like I said, it just keeps evolving to the best thing they can. I mean, I think they just not too long ago signed a deal with ESPN. They partnered into something. So, it's going to be going, how long could it go? I mean, everybody hoped that there are guys now, when Bill and I played, nobody was there was very few guys, maybe Bobby Grebe working for STX. They worked for, Docky started a whole company. He had Lax World and guys like that. They made their living. Now there's a lot of guys making a living in lacrosse between coaching and doing individual lessons and, whatever else they're doing with it. They can, the question is, how long term is it going to be for them? You got to make that choice as a person, do I want to go have a career with, go work in finance or go work here or go do something there? Or I'm going to try to ride this lacrosse thing out and grind it out, because it is a grind. There's no question. Sure. I give these guys credit. I mean, people talk about these club teams and the guys who own these club teams and that. And I'm like, yeah, everybody thinks it's like, oh, they must be making so much money. I'm like, these poor guys are standing on fields for hours and hours and hours, one field to the next field to the next. And I love lacrosse. I love it as much as anybody. Sure. But I think it's a little, I have my own feelings about how much these kids are playing today. I think it's a little too much,
I love multi-sport athletes, Vinny. I mean, you played basketball, you played other sports, and Max, you played soccer. I played soccer. I mean, I think it's important to play other sports personally, but
I think it gives different body parts a rest. I think, the repetitiveness of something, these guys are really, it was funny. I was talking, I saw an interesting thing on Instagram or somewhere. Guy wanted to form basketball. I think it was John Stockton. They were talking about the level of athleticism, talking about basketball players today, and the way and Stockton said, and they say bigger, stronger, faster. And he said, bigger, stronger, faster. He goes, these guys have more injuries than any. He goes, I never missed a game in 14 years. We played. It wasn't like load management, okay, this guy's not playing tonight because they're managing his, back then that was unheard of. This was your job and you were going to play, Now, of course, technology, everything can get better. There's better training methods and the maybe eating better. Who the heck knows? They always talk about that. But guys who were athletes and great in the sport at one time or another, they could fit into any era. They'd figure it out and find a way to be great, whether they were playing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, That's my opinion,
Well, I think there's another guy. We've mentioned his name a couple of times. You guys have. I want to sort of hear your guys' take just a little bit deeper. John Phillips, RIP, I laid to rest almost a year ago. In his tenure with the Long Island Lacrosse Club, I could find that he was a part of 18 USCLA championships and claimed another 12 additional runner-up finishes. Can you guys speak a little bit more in detail about the legacy that he left behind for Long Island Lacrosse and Long Island Athletic Club?
Yeah, John was, it's funny, Vinny described him earlier, said, assistant coach, general manager, fundraiser, whatever, but he was the glue. He was the glue. When I showed up, John had played at Cornell. He wasn't the best player in the world. He's had a couple of boys that both played at Cornell as well, an attackman and a midi. And John's wife, too, you got to give her credit, Sally, was a very, very integral part of Long Island Lacrosse Club because she ran our books. She did everything. And John was a technology guy, and John would print out, players. This guy, John Phillips, when we started Long Island, when I started, and this was before me, we used to have pluses and minuses at the game. At club lacrosse. I mean, I'm an adult. I graduated college. And he's like, all right, you missed that ground ball, minus. Oh, you missed. I mean, at the end of the game, you would get your pluses and minuses. You would get them at the end of every game. And John was responsible for all that stuff. So besides coaching and, fundraising and organizing and scheduling and everything, I mean, he did everything for that team. And he was just, he was incredible. I went to his memorial service last year, and it was overwhelmingly attended by well, Vinny was there, I was there, so many people that loved him, and his wife Sally's still alive, but John was the glue. So Vinny.
Yeah, no, John, and of course they gave him that same responsibility on a national level, working for more or less for the U.S. teams. He along with Nolan Rogers, so it's funny, like you take our team and you got those kind of guys, the head coach, the Tom Flatley, and then you got John Phillips, and you got these kind of like post stuff. And you look at Maryland Lacrosse Club or even Mount Washington, they got those same kind of guys, like for Maryland Lacrosse Club, Nolan Rogers and this guy, without those kind of people, the whole thing would fall apart.
Sure.
Because they are the nuts and bolts. They do the stuff that the players definitely don't want to do. You don't want to take that responsibility. As a player, I want to know, where do I have to be, what time, and I'll be there. Just tell me what I got to do. These guys are taking care of all the rest. And John did that for so many years, and he just really loved it. He really loved it. He was, and then like we said, Mr. Beroza, Mrs. Beroza, there was always a parent or that got involved in it, and had a son playing on the team, that they would come to, and they, whatever help they could be. Is there anything I could do? No, well, good, relax, go sit, watch the game, but they were always interested in helping, and that's what made it great, Yeah. I wish that, I don't know, like these kids are growing up now. They have it to a certain extent. A lot of these teams, they make like an Express or Team 91 or any of these other, club teams. And then these kids from like 9, 10 years old, they play together through their going to college. So those families become close. That's the beauty of the sport and in that whole part of it.
Sure.
That's all the plus side of it. And I always say to guys, I got friends who maybe didn't even play lacrosse. They're like, that lacrosse, you guys are crazy. It's a cult. You guys are nuts. They're driving all over the map. And I say, look, they say this kid will never be a Division I player. And I say that's not what it's all about. He's not relying on being a Division I. Even if your kid is just socially doing things, is good enough, or should be good enough.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that this has been awesome. I want to kind of wrap things up a little bit about sort of the bigger picture. I think the first one, the figurative elephant in the room right off the jump, is the article where this whole idea started was about that team from Baltimore, and the writer believed that they were the best lacrosse team of the 20th century. You even said it, they were the team of the 80s, and it was 1982, right? The article even went on to say, coming out of college, the best players went to Mount Washington. What do you guys have to say about that? I want to give you the floor.
Vinny, you go first. Go ahead.
Well, I would say the best players who lived down there played for Mount Washington, maybe. I think Maryland Lacrosse Club would have more to say about it than us, but, that was their thing down there. But yes, who they had such history. That Norris Field is legendary place, that little postage stamp under the highway over there. The first time I played there, I was like, what is this place? That little locker room that had nothing in it. It was like a shack, but it had such great history. And then when you think of it in terms of all the great players that ever played there, yes, they had a historic. Long Island was more like the new kids on the block compared to them. They going back to, I don't know what year Mount Washington was established. I forget what year, but it was probably half a century before the Long Island team got started. Wow. So I think didn't they play in like the 23 Olympics or something? I think the Mount Washington team played in the Olympics in like the 20s or something.
Wow.
They just picked that team to go play.
Yeah. And don't forget, and Max, you asked a question about Long Island and Mount Washington, but the MLC, but you had Chesapeake Lacrosse Club, which again in the day had a lot of great players go there. Before them, Carling Lacrosse Club, right? So there were other teams down in the Baltimore area. And to Vinny's point, the best players got out of college and they went everywhere. Mount Washington would probably get the lion's share of them at that point in time. Long Island, because they were the they were the forerunners for lacrosse, club lacrosse. We'd typically get the best players. But then as other teams evolved, as Vinny said, there were so many players that we had that, other Harvey's Lacrosse Club, North Hempstead, Tobay, Suffolk,
New York AC.
New York Athletic Club. But you also had Westchester Lacrosse Club. You had Pepsi Lacrosse Club. You had Connecticut Valley Lacrosse Club. And
Bandits.
Yeah, and there were some good players, Skoll, that went to those teams. That if there was only one team, they would have come to Long Island. So in the beginning, we had great players come there. But then again, there were great players that went to all those other teams, including New Jersey Lacrosse Club, right? That's where, New Jersey Lacrosse Club, we only beat them by 1 goal. Remember, at Hempstead High on that dirt field.
That game, yeah. Mike Page was playing for them. They had a great
Mike Page, yeah. So they had, they had USA team players playing for them and first team All-Americans. And John Griffin was their goalie who made the USA team in '86.
Right.
With Larry Quinn, who was a Long Island goalie. So, there's just so many great players. But if you sat down with Vinny and myself and like Mark Greenberg for MLC or Skip Lickfist representing Mount Washington and said, we're the best players, we're always going to say Long Island. Of course we are.
Yeah.
You're going to say upstate New York.
Hey.
Yeah.
So you got, if you don't have loyalty, what do you have,
No, there was a time, like I remember the lacrosse guide. I used to go buy it at the Manhasset Sports Shop. He was like the only guy who had it, and that would show like even high schools in there, like the All-Americans and but the first page, there would be somebody on the cover. I remember Eamon was on the cover one year. And when you opened it up, the inside flap had the first team All-American Division I guys.
Yep.
I think maybe the back flap had the Division II or III guys, And that was like the Bible to me. I was looking at who these guys are, where they were from. And, at that time, every player was either from Long Island or from Baltimore area, And then it started to break, look, Wes Jenny, when you talk about history, the players that came through that program and how they excelled come at some point,
I got to interrupt you. So, but even so, Jimmy D'Arcangelo, Hall of Fame, great player, many USC. Where's he from? Corning East, New York. Yes. So
and then you got Bob Grebe, who's a Maryland lacrosse legend, but he went to Deer Park High School on Long Island,
Yes.
So you had transplanted guys too.
Exactly.
When we played Bryan, you had Brooks Sweet playing up there. You had Mike O'Neill playing for them.
Yeah, Brooks is
Jeff Long from Arundequoit High School. These are all.
Yeah.
So I laugh when people ask me because they know I remained in the game so long, and they say, "Who's the best or this or that or whatever?" It's like there's so many good guys. You just want to be like you're among the crew, okay, my name is thrown in with these guys somehow, and you should be happy with that,
That's awesome.
But at the end of the day, I always look to mark my career not by if I made all club or championships mattered to me. I wanted to win championships, I felt like with us, it was kind of like, it was all or nothing. Like if we didn't win the championship, that wasn't a successful year. We had years we were 17-1, and we say, "Did you have a great year?" No, we lost in the finals. Right. Most guys would be so through. There are teams that, in all the years I played, I hate to say it, but like Tobay or something, I never lost to them once. I must have played 60-something games against them. Right. Suffolk, I never lost one. The only team I lost to Bryan sometimes. Bryan beat us. New York AC beat us, and Harvey's. I think I lost twice in all the years against 60. So I'm gauging it based on playing twice a year and a playoff game, maybe. So but my overall record against those teams is ridiculous, in terms of wins and losses, And I'm not saying it's because of me. I'm just saying, as a team, that's what it was. We were like relentless about winning. If somebody, it was like if we got beat, you saw such joy in those teams to beat us. I would sometimes almost feel good for them, to be honest with you. I would like to be like, all right, you got us. All right, you finally got us.
Well,
because it gets to be, but believe me, I wasn't trying to let them win. I like to win at every single thing.
sure.
But the fact that it's so hard, like MLC had their run, Mount Washington had their years. I will say this, because we started this whole conversation because we said Mount Washington was put on blast for what they did. I don't think there was any team that had the consistency of Long Island. Like, a bad year for Long Island was 3 losses. I know even MLC, who was very powerful early 80s, they had a lull there for a while. They were lucky if they were like a 500 record. We never had a season like that in all the years I played.
That's awesome.
If it was like, if we had 2 losses, it was like, we blew it. 3 losses, it was like a disaster. All right, well, we're 15-3, and that's like a disaster for us. Other teams would be like so thrilled.
Wow.
I met a guy. I have to tell you a funny story. So my nephews were playing at Princeton, and my sister goes to a tailgate. She meets a big, tall guy. I think you know him, Bill. Adam Hardy.
Adam Hardy.
Yeah. So my sister says to me, I met his son was playing for Princeton. Nice kid, big kid, good player. So he said to my sister, I played against your brother. So she said, really? In what? So he says, in club lacrosse. He played one of the Connecticut teams, So she says, oh, how'd you do? So he says, don't ask, like he said. So he tells her a story. And he tells the story. They played one year. They get into the playoffs. One of the years they had one of their better teams. And they played Brine. And the winner of that game plays the winner of our game, whoever we would play. We had to play North Hempstead or somebody. And they beat Brine for the first time ever. He says, and he's in the bar. He says, in there, everybody's having beers and they're cheering and they're going, Long Island won't know what hit them. They had to come down and play us at Hofstra, They're not going to know what hit them. They don't know what we have this year and this and that. He's telling my sister, and my sister goes, how did it go? He goes, we get down there, we're all charged. It was a team that the guy, what was his name? Hutch, the guy Hutch coach. Remember that guy Hutch?
Oh, yeah. No, and Adam Hardy is a very good friend of mine now here in Minnesota.
Yeah. So he says, we get down there, we're warming up. They're going to be in for it today. And my sister, how'd it go? He said, I think it was 10-0. We didn't even touch the ball yet, and we used both our timeouts. He said, before we got the ball, he said, they killed us, So I said, well, they were. I
think it was like 20-2 or something.
Yeah, he says they were like a different level. He goes, they were a different level,
Oh,
but
man.
that's what it was. I can only imagine what it was like when teams came to Hofstra to play us, some of those teams, and looked at like our roster and saw us warming up and saying, oh, we were in for it. We're going to have to really play good. And a lot of these guys were teammates from college. They were phenomenal players.
Right.
But I think that we had a little bit of a psychological edge over most of these teams,
Sure.
I don't think we had a psychological edge over the Maryland teams who we ultimately played in the finals. I think they were very confident because they had beaten us, and it was like, but there was a run where we went against MLC like 10 years in a row, it seemed like, right?
That's incredible.
Vinnie and I are ready for a rematch, Oh, actually, we do. We still play in some of these old man tournaments, right? In Florida, places.
I just want that shot back against Mahan. I want a second chance at that shot. Maybe he'll give me a chance one day.
Well, and I think you just spoke to this, Vinnie, but I'm curious, and just sort of to put a bow on this whole thing. And I want to keep the question simple. What made Long Island Lacrosse Club different? What set it apart?
For me, it was the people, the people that were involved in it, and the culture that we created of competitiveness between each other, challenging each other on our team, and like I said, we weren't for everybody because we held guys accountable, and we could be brutal with each other, and a lot of guys can't handle that. If you could get past that and understand it was only done because out of love, so to speak, that we wanted to win so badly, then you were fine with us. There were guys who came and went in a year. They were like, I can't play on this team, I'm here to have fun, and these guys, they're all in to win.
Sure.
And so that's different strokes for different folks. If you just want, then go play for one of these other teams. But it was definitely, and the carry to the consistency. Like I said, a guy like John Phillips being there so many years, that same, and even the different coaches we had through the years. For me, starting with Tom, but even prior to me, a guy like Jack Taylor, these were all the same type of guys, who had love for the team and had love for the sport. And it showed when you were on the field,
Sure.
and it wasn't an easy thing to hold together because, like I said, people have different lives, and clubs started to change a little bit, and then there were more teams, and teams were breaking apart. But we held it together pretty damn good, I got to say.
Totally. Coach, what about for you? What set it apart?
I think Vinny said it. I don't want to call it a blue collar mentality, but we had so many different diverse people from, I started off the conversation an hour ago with, firemen and teachers and doctors and lawyers and everything. We just had a really good eclectic group. But candidly, I think it comes back from your own personal attitude and experience, right? Vinny's an athlete, man. He's a great athlete, and he doesn't want to lose. And, I won't comment on myself, but I don't like to lose, end of story. That's it. I don't care. Somebody say, like if I was competing with my mom, my dad, my sister, my brothers, like, I don't want to lose. I don't care,
That's
and
awesome.
so that was it. I hate losing. And, it's funny, as a goalie, people say, oh, you got to forget about that last goal. And, and maybe I needed some psychiatry or psychological training. I said, I remember goals I gave up in college that still haunt me today against Hobart. Your nemesis, the championship game my senior year in college. And, it's like I play in the adult leagues now in tournaments and they love these guys. They're great guys from Hobart. But I remember that game vividly. And, Vinny, so one funny quick story. I know you asked about the attitude, but George Parks, who's a dear, dear friend of mine, he was a second-team All-American attackman. My dad, after the game, said if Parks had just hit that goal against Rick Blick, you guys would have won that game. I said, Dad, if I had made another save, we would have won the game. If Vinny would have scored that goal, we would have maybe tied it up.
Right.
But those are the memories that you have, and that's why it makes us competitive because, we don't. But then again, to George Parks' credit, the next year he won the national championship in '78. So,
there you go.
Against Hobart. So, anyway, it's
Max, we would end the game. We used to get the use of a locker room at Hofstra. We go in, guy's going to shower and go maybe to Bill's Meadowbrook. To show you, like, the mentality of guy, Billy is in a push-up contest with Stan Kowalski. He's standing there. He's got a towel on. He's getting ready to go. And he's like, hey, think you're built? Look at me. I can do more push-ups than you. You can't do more push-ups. Next thing you guys are doing push-ups. Push-up contests, We're driving to games. Guys in a van. Guys are arguing. I'm faster than you. They pull over the van. They're racing on the highway. A foot race on the highway to see who's faster.
Wait.
When you got guys with that mentality, you're hard to beat.
Totally.
Max, I gotta tell one story. I don't know if it'll make it to your podcast or where it gets put in or cut out or deleted. But so Vinny, and I don't know if you remember that, you wouldn't necessarily know it. I was told this story. 3 out of 4 have passed away, but there's a club game down at Mount Washington, and after the games, they used to go to Spar Washers, which became the Mount Washington Tavern, and they drank and hang out. So Tom Postel, who was playing, Stan Kowalski playing, Ron Frazier, and what's Dick Postel's brother?
Roadrunner.
Roadrunner. Richie. So the 4 of them are in the car. They get in the car at, I don't know, 1 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. after, Sunday night. They got to go back to Long Island to work on Monday. And you leave 495 out of Baltimore. And all of a sudden, Roadrunner's driving, and everybody's asleep in the car. And Roadrunner goes, he turns around, he goes, everybody's sleeping. He says, I'm going to sleep too. So he pulls over on the side of the road, parks the car, turns it off, and goes to sleep. And all of a sudden, the sunlight's coming up. And Stan Kowalski goes, hey, where are we? We on Long Island Expressway? It's like, no, we're still in Baltimore.
He's still in Baltimore.
He said, you guys went to sleep. I wasn't driving by myself. So that was a good club story for Long Island AC days.
Oh, yeah. No, those trips. We actually used to take a bus from Sewanaka High School sometimes down to the games in Baltimore.
We could drink. Yeah.
Yeah, so coming home, you had a guy, Jimmy Tatum, who was a great player and a tough guy. He was a wrestler, played football and lacrosse at Rutgers. He was tough. We had Del Giorno was on the team that year. You had the two Huffs. You had Patillo. These guys were beasts, you know. Yeah. And now you throw in the drinking, and we're on the bus, and like these wrestling matches are breaking out, and guys are like getting thrown across the bus, you know. And here I am. I'm out of school. I'm like 160 pounds. I'm like just turned 20 years old, and I'm sitting. And Flatley's up in the front, and he turns. He goes, "Sombrotto, get up here now." He goes, like, you know, your career will be over quick. He goes, you're going to get squashed over there with these guys. I mean, they're going at it like
they're all football players.
Forget it. It was crazy. It was like mayhem. You know, the bus rides were rougher than the game.
Oh, man. No, I appreciate you guys jumping on and giving us this incredible history lesson on Long Island lacrosse and club lacrosse, the way that people don't really know about it in my generation. So I want to thank you for the time, and this has been a ton of fun. So appreciate it, and yeah, man, these are stories that need to be told.
Thanks for having us on. Appreciate it very much.
Of course, of course. You guys have a great afternoon. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. I see you, Bill. Be well.